Coming up next on The Voice of Alabama Politics, House Minority Leader Democrat Craig Ford. Also, the V-Team asks why Brian Taylor is going to be a one-term wonder, and Paul DeMarco's answering want ads in D.C. He wants to be a congressman. All that and more coming up on The V. Welcome to the Voice of Alabama Politics. I'm your host, Bill Britt, and as always, I'm joined by the V-Team. Great to have everybody here today.
Good morning. Good Sunday.
Well, I've got a little surprise this morning. I want to introduce you to my little friend.
And who might that be?
This is Rufus T. Ficus. Now,
Did it cost you $2,000?
We got Rufus as a gift from a fan of the show because a couple of weeks ago we were talking about how Mike Hubbard had the state of Alabama spend $2,500
Oh, no, you didn't do that.
on silk plants. So a guest gave us one. This cost $295, and they assured me that no tax dollars or campaign finance money was used to buy little Rufus. So y'all welcome Rufus to the show.
Happy to have you, Rufus.
Okay, I know that's a little silliness, but it's politics. We got to have some
Who
fun.
was the friend, the viewer that sent it in? Can we find that out?
Do they wish to remain anonymous?
They wish to remain anonymous. They're way in the
like
background.
all good political donors,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Did they wire Rufus?
They're part of a foundation.
Are there any senators in there?
Testing, 1, 2, 3. It's not a Beeson plant.
No, it's not a Beeson plant. Speaking of elected officials, Brian Taylor, the one-term wonder as we're calling him this week, decided to not run for re-election. The senator from Prattville cited family, God, and maybe even the Constitution as reasons he's not running again. But seriously, Barron, what do you think about that?
I think it's, I mean, he does have a young, beautiful family that's growing. His wife is pregnant. But I don't think that's the reason he was getting out. He was campaigning very hard 2 weeks ago, even a few days ago. He was campaigning pretty hard for that seat up there. If you go back and look at his campaign finance records, you'll see that there's a poll that was in-kinded to him from Bob Riley in the 2014 PAC. I saw a poll that was also done about the same time frame that had Brian trailing a generic Republican who no one had really ever heard of by over 20 points. And you know that kind of a situation when you're facing re-election, you're the incumbent senator and you're trailing, you're trailing a generic Republican 20 points. He had no choice, I think, but to get out.
Plus, I think they really changed that district up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
In redistricting. But now, I'm sorry, as a Republican, we all talk about family, American apple pie, and all that.
I know.
Okay, so I don't really believe that. And you're right, he does have a young family, but there's plenty of members, female and male, that have run with offices like that. Plus, not to mention, his wife has a grant writing firm. Okay, what better yet to get the state senator's wife, hire her to write your grant. She's not going to be as popular writing grants, I don't think, if he's not a state senator.
Well, that's true. I mean, but who's going to replace him? I mean, who's out there? Do you?
There are at least 3 names that we've heard so far, and I know Claire and I were talking beforehand about 2 that she's familiar with.
Yeah, there's a gentleman named Harris Garner out of the Millbrook area who I don't really know yet, but I've heard a lot of great things about him.
Garner Electric.
He's got an electric company. He's been the past president of the chamber there for 2 years, so he's certainly got tentacles out to all the business folks, should be able to raise money. And then there is Suzelle Josie, who is kind of a household name to those of us in the Montgomery area market because I guess she's going to run for this House seat, but she ran against State Senator Larry Dixon twice that I recall, and she used to live in my neighborhood down the street from me. And she says she has some ties to Roy Moore, but she really has just been more of a far right-wing activist and a supporter. I don't believe she was ever on the payroll for Roy Moore.
Well, the third candidate that we've heard this week say that he has expressed some interest in it is Bobby Bright, the former mayor of Montgomery and former congressman from South Alabama. It's my understanding, though, at least from the rumors that I've
Where
heard.
would he run, as a Republican or
As a
Democrat?
Republican. I don't think
really?
you can't
Okay,
run in that
interesting.
district, I don't think, right now as a Democrat. So if he runs and gets in the race, I think he does run as a Republican.
Interesting.
And I want to sit this out because I'm actually involved in some of the goings-on to replace Senator Taylor, so I'm going to sit out the discussion of the
Okay.
people that are looking at that race.
Well, I mean, he had a promising career at one time. I mean, he looked like a golden boy, and now he's out.
Well, yeah, he was hand-chosen, hand-picked by Governor Riley, and
Yeah.
he was like a little son to Mike Hubbard, and they clearly, I mean, if you look at it, if there's any senator, current sitting state senator that would have benefited most from the GOP in 2010, Brian Taylor would have been one of those. Now, that brings me to another point. We still keep hearing rumors about what's going on in Lee County, and it's not rumors. I mean, everybody now, as of last week, the mainstream media has reported on this. So now that the mainstream media has reported on it, it's got to be factual.
It must be true. It is true.
You're one that's reported on a long time, but this gives you some credibility now.
You were a voice in the wilderness for 18 months,
Well,
Bill.
it's tough being a prophet, what can I say?
But you have your plant now.
Yeah, I do have Rufus. One of the other interesting thing that happened this week was Paul DeMarco announced that he's going to run to replace Spencer Backus once Backus retires. DeMarco's got a shot up there, I think. He's a pretty sharp guy. A lot of folks like him. He certainly will play well in Homewood and Mountain Brook and those areas.
Well, if you look at his campaign finance reports for his current seat, he's got some big name Birmingham moneyed folks, so he will have the money to bring to the race.
But now he can't use. Remember, y'all, the congressional races and state races, they're two different total
Right.
pots
No,
of
no,
money.
but he's got the same kinds of folks who would be
Right.
willing,
Right,
would
but
assume,
he's-
to contribute
And he
to
has
his
about
campaign.
$300,000 sitting in his campaign account, his state campaign
That's a good
account.
start.
So it's a good start should he want to enter back into state politics later if he's
Right.
not successful.
Right.
That district is split by a mountain. He does really well on one side of the mountain, not so well on the other side of the mountain. Fortunately for him, the side of the mountain with money is where he really shines.
But I mean, I think he is a great candidate, no question about it. I think that he looks like a young, fresh congressman to represent that district in Alabama. He's done well here in Montgomery. He's got a darling wife. And matter of fact, I just understand that they are actually expecting their first baby, so that's
about that?
exciting.
Well,
as well.
congratulations. All right.
And I think that he will be able to raise a lot of money, but on the other hand, you have Gary Palmer, who's run the API, Alabama Policy Institute, for years, and he's got tremendous donor base all across the state of Alabama. And then I also think you've got Dr. Morris, who I would say is a dark horse in this race. Once
Yeah.
again, I've said he's like a Terry Everett when Bill Dickinson retired. But
Well, let me add one more name to this discussion before you move on. John Blackwell could self-finance this thing 4 or 5 times over.
Right.
He is very, very wealthy.
Right.
He's been very successful. He seems to be clean as a whistle from what I've been able to tell. And I think he could even come in and shake that race up considerably. I mean, there's nothing in there that dissuades me.
And that's Senator Slade Blackwell's father.
that's right.
Correct.
The other name that I've heard is Robbie Owens, the popular
former DA.
Shelby County District Attorney.
And you can't leave out Scott Beeson. Scott plays very well in the rural communities. I know he's run before.
He's run.
He's taller than everyone else. He has that going for him. But he also, Tea Party people love Scott Beeson. I don't know if he can win, but I think he can be a contender. He said on the other day on one of those talk shows that he's planning on waiting till January. To me, that sounds like he's out.
Yeah, I've even talked to him some. He said he's highly considered. He thinks, there was a poll that was done by the NRCC, the first one out, and he polled very well as a possible winner. But that's simply because, he ran against Spencer the last time.
We're going to have to catch this up later on. Coming up next, Representative Craig Ford. He's going to give us the Democratic perspective on what's up for 2014. Stay tuned. You're watching The V.
I think someone at my friend's school has this thing called autism. My friend's brother's son has autism. My neighbor's son has autism. My son has autism.
Autism is getting closer to home. Today, 1 in 88 children is diagnosed with autism. That's a 1,000% increase in the last 40 years. Learn more at autismspeaks.org/signs.
I make sure to get your kids to school and home safe every day. I am AEA.
I make sure your child receives a healthy meal each day. I am AEA.
Thank you, AEA, for protecting our public schools and our futures. We are AEA.
When some people struggle with their mortgage payments, they become frozen, petrified. Not knowing what to do, they do nothing. But the people who take action are far more likely to get the most positive outcome. Making home affordable is a free government program. Call now to talk one-on-one with a housing expert about the options that are right for you. Real help, real answers, right now.
Welcome back to the V. Our guest today is Minority Leader, Democrat Representative Craig Ford from Gadsden. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Bill.
You've been in the House of Representatives since 2000, right?
That's correct.
And a lot of changes over that period of time, I guess. The most being the last 3 years with the takeover of the Republican Party. You've had your battles. What do you think are the biggest ones ahead?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is for the people's voice of Alabama to be heard. With a Republican supermajority in both chambers, there's a procedural motion that they call cloture. When we get up to speak and they don't like what's being told, they just cloture us and they shut us up and sit us down. And so people aren't being heard in the state of Alabama. I represent the same number of people that every other representative represents, somewhat 50,000, give or take 1% of constituents. And so the people that I represent should be heard just as well as anyone else ought to be heard.
With the supermajority, and we've seen this time and time again, there is no compromise. It's just one way or no way, their way or no way. I mean, we see that in Washington right now, and people are not happy about it. I mean, do you find that's true in Alabama too?
Absolutely. I believe that I believe a third of the state are they're Democrat, a third are Republican, and the other third are independent. And the independent vote is what every elected official tries to appeal to. So I think the Republican supermajority in Montgomery have done a poor job of trying to appeal to the independent vote, i.e., example, the Alabama Accountability Act, which we call the school voucher bill. They spent $41 million to send 51 children to private schools.
And then the money went back into the general fund, not into the education fund?
That's correct. And not only that, we're going to try to offer a piece of legislation to take that $41 million and put it towards the AMSTI program or teacher pay raises or, educator pay raises. But it's difficult the way the bill was passed. They cut a deal in the back room. They came out. We had 1 hour to debate a piece of legislation that had been changed drastically. It was a whole new piece of legislation. They didn't allow our members in to debate. So basically there were 6 members on a conference committee. They only needed 4 to have the majority vote, so they did not allow the 2 Democrats in to debate the piece of legislation. They came out. It took us 30 minutes to copy the bill before we could even look at it. In any type of piece of legislation like that, it should take us 2 to 3 days to put before the people, to let us see what's in the bill, to try to decipher every piece of the language that's in the bill. And we had 30 minutes to look at it, read it, debate it, and pass it. The bill was already drafted up. It was already in their drawer. They knew what they were doing. They even said, the governor came on TV and he said, this is the only way we could have done it. We had to do it the way we did it. And now they're trying to run from their voting record, and it's not going to work.
Well, from what I understand, that bill is not polling well among the people of Alabama. But being there when they passed it, to say that that's the only way you can pass it means that their members really weren't all that for it. They had to force them into being for it. Is that?
Absolutely. And, people like in my district representing Nord Green and Butler and Senator Phil Williams, they're all trying to run from their voting record.
Right.
And they're trying to appeal to the education workforce today, the retirees, the support staff, and the active employees. But, it's not going to work. We're going to remind the people of Alabama what they have done to the public education system. And it doesn't matter if you're from Mountain Brook or if you're from Wedowee, Alabama, or from Gadsden, Alabama. Everybody loves their public schools.
Oh, yeah.
And the only way our economy is going to work and we're going to grow the workforce in Alabama is to improve our public education system.
Well, that's always been the problem. We end up at the bottom of the barrel with financing or funding, but yet our teachers seem to get us up there pretty high, at least around 30. At least we're not at the bottom of the barrel anymore.
Well, exactly. And the two most important assets in the classroom are the students first and the educators second. But if you continue to kill the morale of the educators, it's got to influence the way they perform in the classroom. So, the Republican supermajority took 2.5% of their paycheck in 2010 and 2011 and 2012, and they took 7.5% from these educators, and then they come back and they give them 2%, and it goes back to the Senate, and my very own senator, Senator Phil Williams, chose to repeal it back to 1%.
Right.
It ended up passing at 2%. So if you give somebody 2%, but you take away 7.5%, you do the math. I'm not a perfect mathematician, but that's still a negative 5.5%.
Well, and a lot of this is them being, you just can't take away from education and then say we're pro-education. That seems to be what's
exactly. And a lot of these are one-termers. A lot of these came in the tsunami in 2010. A lot of national politics bled down into the southern states, and it happened across the country, and that's fine. Politics is like a pendulum. It goes back and forth. And with social media and the way things are today with the news and like your show, people are briefed more often and they become better educated. And so, hopefully there'll be a change in 2014, which we think there will be.
Well, I know we're from the same area, and I hear all the time that Senator Williams is not looking so good for the next election.
No, he's not looking good, and it's obvious that you're running advertisement 13 months prior to the election. So he's trying to build his name ID up and his favorability rating, and it's just, now they're going into all the schools. They had an education day trying to tell them how much they love public education, but they're not being very well welcomed right now, and they shouldn't be.
Right.
But, that's the way politics goes.
Let's bring up a subject from the past, a lottery. There's been a lot of talk over the years about a lottery. There are 40 states and D.C. that have a lottery. The rest of us, Alabama, we don't have one. What's your thoughts on that now?
Bill, I think, it's polling over 65% of the people in Alabama want a lottery. The reason why it didn't pass in 2000 under the Siegel administration, the governor's office got too greedy with the money. We have sponsored a bill. I have actually sponsored the bill, and I'm going to sponsor it again. 100% of the proceeds from the lottery, which would be about $240-some-odd million that we're losing to the other states that we're boundaries up to, would go straight 100% to education. The Hope Scholarship in Georgia, one reason it doesn't work is because they guarantee a scholarship. So what you do, you just put the pot of money from the lottery into the pot, and then whatever amount of students are available to receive the scholarship, they're able to participate. It may be 60% one year, could be 80%, could be 75%. But we're losing Alabamians, taxpayers' dollars to other states and sending other children to college at our expense.
Do you feel that the Democrats have a chance to come back? I mean, we're running out of time, but...
Yeah, absolutely. We've been traveling the state recruiting candidates, and, we have some fantastic candidates. And, remember this, all politics is local. People, they don't like talking about Democrat, Republican. They want to talk about the person who they know and respect from their hometown. And that's what we're trying to do, is find candidates that have an independent voice, that don't believe the way I believe, that can represent their constituents for what's best for their district. And we found those candidates.
Well, that's good. One of the things I keep saying is, find me a Nancy Pelosi Democrat in Alabama. Our Democrats are fairly conservative.
They're fairly conservative. And the good thing is the Democratic Party represents what the people of Alabama look like. We have all types, men, women, black, white, and Hispanic. So we represent the mirror image of Alabama.
Well, I want to thank you for being here, and good luck being the opposition.
No.
All right.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it.
Thank you. We're the V. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
The next 30 seconds can save you a lot of money. Just do your laundry in cold and stick to full loads. Auto-sleep your computers. Plug your gadgets in a power strip and switch it off when you're done. Headed out? Turn back your thermostat by 10 degrees. And drive sensibly. The more energy you save, the more money you save. Find other great tips at energysaver.gov.
Here's what customers are saying about WeatherGuard Lifetime Metal Roofing.
Kind of makes the rest of the house stand out and pop in the front, and it's It's low maintenance to me.
I was extremely impressed with the facility that they have to display their product.
Hello, I'm Robert Wells, president of WeatherGuard. We are a family-owned business and we will back our lifetime warranty for generations to come.
Come by our showroom on Alton Road in Birmingham. WeatherGuard Lifetime Metal Roofing, 533-7322.
Welcome back to the Voice of Alabama Politics. Our guest today has been Craig Ford. Craig brought up a lot of great points, Claire, and one of them has been this Accountability Act. That kind of is out there in the state. People are not real happy, it looks like, but Republicans are still trying to push it.
It's buyer's remorse.
Well, I don't know that they have a choice but to push it. They own it. They voted for it twice.
And you're right. And you take this House Race 74, which is just one special election in Alabama, and that's been the major issue there, is the accountability bill.
It's really the only difference between the two candidates.
Right.
If you go back to the original primary, the two candidates who oppose the Accountability Act get 68%. The one who in favor of it gets 32%. I hear the polls now look very similar going into the runoff.
Yeah, and I hear that the accountability candidate, her numbers are down and the other gentleman is up.
Why is that? I mean, why is this playing so poorly?
I think it was a bad idea from the start. I mean, when you have a bill that you have to kind of pull a bait and switch on and you have a supermajority in the legislature, that's not a good sign that this is a popular idea. And pulling money out of public schools in Alabama is always a bad idea.
Well, I think it's just, you can argue about whether the philosophy behind the accountability in charter schools is good or bad, but I think it was also in the way it was handled, like the push and shove and manipulating and then not letting anybody see it. I think that's what so many of the Republicans have a problem with, that voted for it or didn't vote for it, or, they're in good school districts where they're not going to use this.
Sum it up in one word, Bill. The problem is arrogance. It's not the merits of the Accountability Act people are so frustrated with. It's the arrogance with which it was passed and the arrogance with which it's been touted since it's passed. People are tired of it.
Well, some of the reports we've seen on the Accountability Act they strained the imagination if they were actually true, and then some of these folks have filed into these lawsuits. These are kind of questionable. I mean, one of the women that's that's joined the lawsuit, she used to work for Twinkle Kavanaugh. I mean, it's a little
That's
weird.
so plant. That's better than the potted plant.
I mean, it's just a little strange.
The problem with the Accountability Act in the get-go, in my mind, was that the people that the Republicans were saying it was supposed to help are the very people who can't afford to front that money and wait for a tax credit. So that basic premise to me is flawed. How many people, I would like to know, have taken advantage of this tax credit? And I don't think we won't know until...
I think it was in the 50s or 60s last time the number came out.
With no comma and...
No. 50 or 60 people had taken advantage of the tax credit.
Right, that's it, 50 or 60
And there were only a handful of schools actually taking students.
Is it, though, that Alabama, while it is a red state, it's what I call sort of a Baptist populist. I've been called that before. I'm conservative. I like my family values. But when it comes to education and all that, I'm just a little weary from stuff, maybe not.
Well, and another example, because, obviously in Montgomery, not the rest of the state, but in Montgomery, where you have 46 private schools in central Alabama alone. Now, I'm a mother of 3 and have to send 3 children to a private school. There's all this base around here that thought, hey, we're going to get that $3,000, $3,500 credit. So that voter base, which was traditionally Republican, in the end, they're mad because they didn't get the credit.
Right.
Well, shoot, everybody wanted that $3,500, and that was what was promised, and it didn't end up happening that way. The other thing that I thought that Representative Ford brought up that was pretty interesting is the notion of a lottery. I wasn't here the last time that came around, but we were coming home to Alabama right about when it blew up. We heard about it blowing up down here. We just weren't here for it.
Well, that was in 1999. Governor Siegelman, that's what he ran on. His consultants did everything like the Georgia governor did. I think it was a great idea, but the bottom line was how it was handled, how it was executed, and the governor and his staff got greedy, and they started doing some backroom smoking deals, and the opposition came up with these great ads, and there was this whole ticket fixing scandal, which just, showed the good old boys network again, and it went down like a burning flame of fire in the last 2 weeks.
Well, the other thing I think, Claire, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was the timing of the election too. It wasn't it wasn't held as part of a major referendum during a normal election cycle. It was in an off.
Right, it was in a late October, early November of that '99. Right,
well, I was surprised his polling so high, and that's what he said.
Well, and that's the thing is when you look at the numbers, the polling is astronomical. Right. I mean, it has been for 20 years in the high 60s, low 70s, which is where it is today. People in favor of a lottery. What they want, though, is an honest and fair lottery.
That you hit the nail on the head. That's what was happening in the Siegel administration and his chief of staff and all his people. And you mentioned about the date of the election. Most people wanted. They specifically wanted a special election just for this one entity, his folks did. And it backfired on them.
You know, it's all around us. I mean, we've got 40 states that have it. D.C.'s got it. Probably a lot of folks want it. We'll see what's going to happen on it.
And anecdotally, when you look at the news, whenever the Powerball numbers get up very high, all of the newscasts show these gas stations and these service stations that are right across the line, and they're filled with cars with Alabama tags on them.
Yeah, whether they're in Georgia, Florida, wherever, they're there, Tennessee.
Well, it's a lot of money. Of course, when there's a lot of money involved in politics, we all have to worry.
What are you saying, Bill?
Well, I'm just saying that, you know, money corrupts absolutely.
And Rufus T. Ficus agrees with you.
He does, he does.
Well, you say when there's a lot of money involved, we get $2,500 on the plan?
And he says,
all jokes aside, you take the accountability bill, you take the lottery, you know, you take the gambling legislation, which, you know, the numbers were very high that the people of the state of Alabama wanted an opportunity to vote on this.
They do.
And I think whether you're for or against any of this, you know, the bottom line is the people of this state deserve the right to vote on an issue.
But the people of this state don't trust our government officials right now.
And they can always replace them.
Well, and that's true. But we are conservative people, so there are going to be folks out there that are going to bang the drum and go, look, we don't need any more corruption outside of government.
Well, now, Mr. Ford acted as if he thought that, do we as a panelist, do we think that the Democrats can really come back and win some of these seats in the House and Senate? In this 2014 cycle.
Not in this next
I don't see
cycle.
it. I mean, the districts seem to suggest it's impossible. Now, the one thing that's hanging out there is if some of this Mike Hubbard stuff blows up in their face and you start seeing people carted away, and some of the names I've heard the last couple of days
and if it's
will
really
blow your mind. And if it's true.
If it's really true that 26 legislators, majority House members, and some senators have received subpoenas, that might lend us back into what just has occurred with
It may be
Mr.
chaos.
Taylor. And if that happens, there could be a real shakeup in the state.
Well, one political operative told me, he said, it's going to happen and it's going to be a bloodbath and the GOP is not prepared to handle it when it happens. We are the V. We discuss topics that a lot of folks are afraid to touch because we care about politics. We know here, even if you don't care about politics, politics cares about you. We're here every week on Sunday. Come back and see us at the V. You can catch us every day at alreporter.com. We're here. You be here. Thanks for being here with us. Thank you very much.